Hey YouTube, it's Buddha Gem, and I'm here in Boston, planning the revolution with guess who? My buddy Chan Chi. You guys know him as Chomsky. Want to say hi? There you go.
Where am I? Hello.
He's got a case of the shyness.
God damn it, he's shy. Yeah, we're planning the revolution. Buddha Jam, Mr. 1001 Nights, and our friend Charnchi, also known as Chomsky.
Yeah, he's got more subscribers than both of us.
Bosses, we're out there to get you.
Yeah.
So you better.
Oh, don't forget Taco Bell.
Oh, there he is.
Taco Bell's here. He's as revolutionary as they get.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Yep.
You don't even want to know what he just said. It'd blow your mind. He's deeper than all three of us. So, Mr. 1001 Nights, one of the interesting things I thought you asked in your questions was kind of the role of the state and whether or not we could have an unbiased state. What did you think of Ferguson's response to that? That the state, at least in his eyes, is necessary to protect certain rights.
Well, that is the one issue I didn't agree with Ferguson. I thought that his analysis was spot on. Investors control the state. We know that, and there's different blocks of investors that control different parties. But I think he understands the state as an institution that can fulfill certain democratic needs. But I don't think because what I was telling Ferguson is that obviously people in government have power, and they have more in common with other people that have power than they do with most of the wage earners who don't have any power. So they're naturally going to have more connections with investors if they do appear. Now, it's true if they don't appear, the public has a chance to influence government policy much more than if they were running the show as they are now. Nevertheless, I mentioned the CNT in Spain because there you started actually realizing the problem you get when even the most democratic governments. Now, I mean, I don't mean to say that the Spanish Republic was one of the most democratic governments, but when you get the real labor power going, I mean, then you see what real democracy is, and that's what I don't think we're never going to see from the state. I mean, in Bolivia, for example, we see that the peasants were able to influence state policy, and I wish we could do the same thing here. Nevertheless, I think there are limits because of the very nature of the state and the origin of the state. I mean, that's something that I was telling Ferguson about. I said, okay, well, Adam Smith and John Locke both said that the origin of the state had to do with inequalities of wealth. So how do you reconcile that with the notion that that the state ultimately is a tool that the working class does not want to get rid of, So that was sort of my question. But I understood that he believes in state policy, and so do I in the short term. And I believe that we should try to democratize the state. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. But we as anarchists would like to get rid of it ultimately.
Sure.
So that's where we don't disagree. I mean, that's where we disagree.
Oh, thank you.
So what do you think about it? Do you agree?
Oh no, I certainly don't agree with it. The idea that the state somehow protects our rights, I think, is a rather naive notion. Actually, I mean, if you look at rights are protected by people like us exercising them. The state very often is the last institution that's going to protect our rights.
Right, but the public can force the state to pass laws that would not allow capitalists to exploit the workforce to the extent that they did in the past, right?
Certainly, but laws are, there's lots of laws in the book. I mean, technically, the invasion of Iraq was illegal according to our Constitution, but that didn't stop. Lots of things can be written down into law, but when it comes down to it, really comes down to it, it's up to us to practice those rights. I mean, you can have a million statutes on the books that protect your freedom of speech, but until you go out and practice that freedom of speech and criticize the government and speak out, then you don't know whether you have that right or not, because whether or not it's written on paper doesn't really amount to a whole lot, you know. I mean, our protection of freedom of speech really goes back to maybe 50 years ago, you know, even though it's been in the Constitution longer than that.
Yeah,
You know?
when people talk about freedom of speech, they always say, "Well, the Bill of Rights is giving me that
Yeah,
freedom."
And it's a ridiculous notion. It's a good example, really, because yeah, it's been written in there, but there's I mean, we have, you know, the what is it, the espionage acts, the various espionage acts used to basically curtail dissent in this country. The famous one, Schneck versus the U.S. government, where he was basically opposing, I think it was World War I, and he was arrested for that, passing out pamphlets. And that's where we get the famous, you know, was it Oliver Wendell Holmes, where he talks about, you know, you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. You know, it's a ridiculous analogy, really, considering what Schneck was opposing. He was opposing the fire in the theater. The theater was a war, you know, so it's a really horrible analogy. And yet, you know, most of us have that notion that the state can pass these laws, and really it comes down to us doing it. We don't need the state to do that, you know.
But what do you think was unusual about Ferguson? Because I found him to be, you know, pretty radical for a college professor.
Oh yeah, he's, you know, and just because we disagree with him on that particular issue, he was an awesome guy, very radical in many respects, and very open to different, you know, ideas and things. I mean, that's his perspective on the state, and that's cool. And I think in the short term, we definitely would agree with him. Let's democratize the state as much as possible. Let's move in that direction. You know, like maybe let's you know, revoke these charters for these corporations. That'd be a good step. There's a lot of things we can do within the framework of the state. I think we're just looking at maybe a longer term. That at a point we reach you know, a ceiling where as much democracy we can get within the state framework, there's still going to be limitations, like you said, because power is going to, you know, there is going to coalesce with other power.
You know, that makes me think about how this state is in our minds as well. So you know, if you could get rid of the government tomorrow morning, it would reorganize itself, because it hasn't. People have not learned to organize themselves to do things without being subordinated to power. So I think perhaps that is one of the things that we need to do, regardless of who is in power.
Sure. I mean, that goes back to the old motto. I mean, it's, you know, organize, educate, agitate, and we're certainly a long ways from that. I mean, the Spanish Civil War is a great example of that. I mean, it took generations of educating the population and you know, for us, spreading anarchist principles, because without those principles, you know, like you said, you could do away with the state tomorrow, and people are really not going to be in the state of mind to maybe organize themselves in the way that they need to, because we're you know, a horrible tragedy happens right now, we're going to be looking for FEMA or the National Guard or somebody to bail us out, because we aren't organized at that level. So yeah, it's certainly something that we have to work towards, definitely.
All right.